Hello, and welcome to Resilience Radio bonus episodes. I'm your host, as usual, Irvin Eisenberg. I am owner of Resilience Occupational Therapy and creator of this show. I am diligently working on Season 2 of this show, and Season 1 has just wrapped up. I wanted to, while you wait, give you some material to listen to. So what we have is bonus questions from previous episodes. Today's bonus material is a little bit longer than usual. I got involved in a conversation with Erin O Connell, a personal trainer, who talked with me about trans queer experience as a personal trainer, as well as addiction. And we both discussed with each other what resilience meant to us. I hope you enjoy it. So you made reference during the podcast to personal experience with addiction. Could you speak to that a little bit and how that's affected your exercise routine in life?
Absolutely. As a teen, I actually got wisdom tooth surgery and became addicted to Tylenol number 3 with codeine. And it took me a week before realizing that that was going to be a really big issue. And fortunately, I had support to get myself away from those drugs. And eventually, I realized that that sort of craving and striving, the wanting of something, played into how I approached many things in life, including exercise. And I sort of, that dawned on me when I was doing a Spartan Beast, and midway through mile 14, I think it was, I looked at a salamander that was trying to cross the path in front of me on the trail in Killington. And I went, why am I doing this? Why am I pushing my body so hard when I can be just here enjoying nature? And I had realized that I had become really addicted to exercise itself. And then I had also struggled with various drugs and alcohol throughout my life. And so I found that by slowing things down and seeking out help on how to be comfortable without those substances and behaviors, that I started to feel a lot more integrated and whole in this body. And it's really hard to feel integrated and whole in a body sometimes.
So I work sometimes, there's sort of a narrative of many personal trainers who talk about their past history with drug addiction, and then almost present it as this heroic thing, and now they do exercise instead. And I sometimes look at it, I'm like, well, it seems like a much healthier addiction, but has someone just replaced one addiction with the other? It seems like you've gone through a little more of the and maybe I'm wrong here, I don't know you well, the sort of some of the soul searching and sort of your explored your own behaviors and relationship to your body in a way that others may not have. And I guess, could you speak to that sort of the heroic personal trainer who's really just an addict in another form versus how you feel?
Um, I guess it makes a lot of sense to me looking back on how uncomfortable I was in my body and just needing an outlet. And exercise after I got sober became an outlet. And it felt really, really good. And so I can kind of speak to that aspect of it, is that like the endorphins are going and there's a lot of high stress on the body. And there's a lot of excitement and a lot of pushing. And that's exactly what drug and alcohol abuse was like for me, oftentimes. And so it took me getting into meditation and meditative practices to kind of see that my exercise behavior was a just another shift in addiction, and that it was also detrimental to my well-being. Um, I almost, I think, went into kidney, like I started to have kidney issues from doing too much exercise. And that was kind of like the wake up call, like, maybe I need to be doing this differently, and how can I approach this in a more caring way for this body? Because again, like you said, exercising is destructive to the muscles, and if I do it too much, it's, also not skillful or wise or helpful for my body. So, um, contemplating each action that I was doing was important for me to figure out what what was the what's the real outcome of my movement? Is it to care for this being, or is it something other than that? Am I looking outside myself for reasons that aren't beneficial for this body?
Mm. And I don't mean to put to demonize those who have not gone as far down the path of um, self sort of control and awareness that you have. That I certainly wanted to make sure my earlier comments weren't to sort of to put down people who have had serious addiction and now are serious exercise addicts, but
Yeah,
like it's a lot better place to be in, and they are working through their own stuff, and we all have our own stuff. So I wanted to
yeah,
make sure that I didn't come off as quite as cold as I may have presented in that question.
it's all good.
um so other question I have for you is regarding being trans, having had gender affirming surgery, which I'm assuming is making yourself more comfortable in your body and feeling more at home in your body. And if you could speak to that experience of not feeling at home in your body while still you're not the sort of the classic nerd um, uh, person who's in their head and was avoiding your body, but so you were very much using your body regularly. But what is it like to be an athlete but not feel at home in your body?
Yeah. Um, I think that's definitely why I can relate to people who don't feel comfortable with movement, is because I definitely felt really uncomfortable with how I presented, and how I was perceived by people, and their assumptions made about my gender and gender presentation. Um, it's really, really difficult to explain, um, walking through the world in, um, a container that does not feel like it's received in the way that you would like it to be received. Um, it's almost like you're dreaming, and you realize in your dream that you're not wearing the body that you normally would be wearing, essentially, is how I can put it. And that's very disorienting and uncomfortable, and people don't see you for you. And you want to be seen in a certain way, and it just isn't happening. So it's like living a nightmare in a certain way. Um, and that was really hard for me, going to gyms and having it be very binary, and walking into the locker room and, having people say, like, "What's that guy doing in here?" when I clearly wasn't presenting as masculine then. And now going into a gym and nobody bats an eye at me when I walk into what's, the way that I'm presenting, essentially. There's no question about who I am, um, how that looks and feels to me. I mean, it literally changed everything about, how I walked in this world, and how I feel in this body now. Um, and to see other people go through that process and accept themselves, against all the odds that happen in our very binary society, is it's empowering, honestly. Um, and it's really incredible to see other folks go through that, and to create a space where they can just be themselves no matter where they're at, if they're transitioning or not. Yeah.
So for the For the listener, do you mind sharing your journey of how you've felt and you said you started off presenting as female, but not necessarily always looking that way. Um,
Yeah.
could you, and where do you stand now, and what is that? What's that process, that journey,
Yeah.
and if that journey is continuing or not? I'll
Yeah. So yeah, I was designated female at birth. And I went through many iterations of trying to present female in the sense that our society anticipates female presentation to be. Let's put it that way. Um, but I was always a quote unquote tomboy, and I moved in a way that matched my brothers and all my guy friends, and did all the sports things and did all the quote unquote boy things, and really struggled to fit in with the gender that I was assigned at birth. Um, Later in life, I still tried really hard and started to adapt to, presenting more feminine, even though I'd cut my hair short, and would go to CrossFit wearing just a sports bra and trying to work out like that. And realizing one day that I felt really, really uncomfortable, just generally like uncomfortable with my body and how I was presenting myself to the world. And so I decided that I was gonna I was on a meditation retreat, um, and all of a sudden realized that I no longer wanted to have my breasts. I was just like, I'm done with this. And so I decided on top surgery. I saw a specialist and at Dartmouth, and she said, "That's great, we can do this, but you need to be on testosterone therapy, because I get better results for my patients who are on testosterone." And I really hadn't wanted to be on hormones up until that point, and at the same time, I knew like this is something that I really wanted to do, and so I started hormone replacement, and as soon as it happened, I was like, why has this been missing my whole life? It was just really incredible all of a sudden just how integrated I felt, and how again how I no longer had to face all the ridicule and the attempting to present one way, and just all the difficulties kind of fell away for me. And it took some time, and that's not to say that it's still not difficult, because it's very difficult, um, as a trans person trying to navigate the world that's binary. Um, but it made me just feel out. It was like coming home to this body. And it was an incredible feeling to have that happen when I had spent uh, 30 years basically uncomfortable and not at home. And that's a long time to not feel uh, in a good place in oneself.
So, given the binary choice at this point of the men's locker room and the women's locker room, how does it feel? I'm assuming you're going into the men's locker room, and how does that feel?
Um, Usually it feels okay. I walk in, I'm just another male presenter there. I do my thing, I get out of there. um, I don't get questioned. Nobody gives me a hard time about my scars. Nobody notices my body at all, because I'm presenting in a way that matches what everybody's anticipating. Um, Whereas when I was presenting female and still kind of having attributes that are more masculine, I was constantly questioned and harassed and bothered and asked why I was in that locker room or why I was using that bathroom. And it's just, easier presenting this way. And I feel safe and secure. And just whole here.
So do you identify at this point? I see. Remind me what your pronouns are. They're not ones I'm
They're
as
neo pronouns. Yeah, they're ni nim nirs pronouns. So I identify as transgender queer, which means that I don't necessarily identify as a binary uh, male. Essentially, um, I present masculine because that's the way that I feel most comfortable presenting, um, and I really still resonate with um, people who are female bodied and um, aspects of femininity that are um, not typical for males to be aware of oftentimes, and sort of embrace dynamic the complex dynamics of our ideas about gender and um, and not just gender in the sense of um, how we're presenting ourselves to the world or how the world perceives us, but gender in the sense of energy, both the masculine and the feminine aspects of people, and really embracing all those different aspects.
so if you were to design a gym locker room setup, what would not to harp too much on the
Yeah, yeah.
on
If I
that. It
was
just
to,
seems like such a classic binary. The or even the spa where there's the men's retreat and the women's retreat
yep,
locker rooms. And you're
yeah, yeah. You know,
what would you feel most comfortable in?
ideally, what I would love to see, my ideal, is that we feel safe with each other. You know, all these different aspects of when we again, it's competition. We've pit ourselves up against males and females, and there's become this fear of one or the other. And I mean, I could go a really big deep dive into misogyny and the patriarchy and uh, um, just the fear of men as well, and just how it would be wonderful if we could just feel safe enough with each other where we didn't have to have this whole kind of like you go here and you go there because you're not safe and because you know we need this space for each other because we've done these things back and forth or whatever it is. People want privacy and I get that. So I mean the easiest thing that I've found is that individual lockers are like the best thing since sliced bread. Like the family restrooms are wonderful because there's just one stall, you go in there and you're set. Um, that to me feels most comfortable. Yeah, it's it's a funny world.
It certainly is. So, are there any questions you wish I had asked?
One of the things that I wonder is that how do you draw out the idea of resiliency um, with your podcast when it comes to interviewing your folks? Like, because I know that's about going into tough spots in life and then coming back out of them feeling a bit stronger, essentially. And so I think um, I guess there's a question formulating around that kind of aspect of it. Like,
Yeah, so the term resilience is I'm quite pleased with the name for my practice and my podcast. The I was I was on a walk with my wife and discussing a name for my business. And I was like, okay, I want to do an LLC. I want to have a real business name now. I had been in practice for quite a while, but I was making a shift as a new OT graduate, had already done the other work. And I said, I know this doesn't work because it's way too verbose, but I really want something that expresses like a dynamic equilibrium, dynamic homeostatic equilibrium. and and my wife was thought about it for a while, and she said, I think resilience might be the right word for you. So I was what I'm by taking on the word resilience, I've definitely there's other connotations with it that have come along, which I'm happy to embrace as part of the practice. But really, what I was thinking about is sort of how we these ever-changing bodies, and how do we make sure we are sort of fluid and bouncy, and the idea that there isn't a single balance point that we're supposed to
Gotcha.
be on.
Cool.
So the dynamic equilibrium would be, um,
Yeah.
but then of course, how do we build ourselves up so that we can take on life's challenges? And that's where what resilience means to me.
Yeah.
And then how do we go through rough situation and decide to let that instead of tearing us down, in what ways can we become stronger for that?
Yeah.
Um, and those came a little bit later in the sort of thinking about it, but certainly I don't shy away from those aspects. But
Yeah.
so to me, resilience means sort of variety and organic life.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. I was just kind of thinking about that in terms of like, how do I express that and what and the work that I do with people and how do I help them move through their own challenges basically, and feel stronger coming out of those challenges. And also kind of just thinking about the populations that have a harder time with resilience, like the LGBTQIA community, the elderly, um, people of color, indigenous people. Just thinking about like how um, they oftentimes will struggle with challenging times because of circumstances that have been kind of surrounding them for a long time, and just kind of applying that as what like keeping for myself that's in mind a lot,
Hmm.
especially in my practice because I know accessibility is a big thing. um, and that's kind of part of the resiliency that I keep in my practice is like I do a sustainable scale pricing so that way people who might not be able to afford the typical personal trainer package or whatever can still have access to it. And I think that's where I was going with creating resiliency for people that don't normally have the ability to like spring back from difficult events that have happened in their lives or in general, and kind of helping them through those times by creating other circumstances that they don't normally aren't there, essentially. So
Yeah, and in my work, the reason went back to school to become an occupational therapist was so that I could bill insurance companies.
yeah.
I mean, it gave some additional job stability, and there's a lot of things I like about occupational therapy. But the 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 bottom line was I was tired of only being able to afford to help those who could afford,
Could afford it, yeah.
and the sliding scale stuff. While I was sometimes doing barter and sliding scale, and most of
Yeah.
those relationships worked out well. It didn't feel sustainable for both parties quite as much.
Hmm.
But I'm not exclusively insurance model. And then the other is like I acknowledge my anything I'm coming at is as a white, if you define Jewish as white, um, white cisgender male of middle to upper class background, that I have lots of privilege, and
Hmm.
I don't feel like I should pretend to be other than I am, in the sense of any sort of platitudes of pretending that I'm understand other people's experience. Um, Minority being not a great term, but for um, less privileged experiences, I try to be as open as I can. And I have images down the road of having a what I'm thinking of as a diversity audit, is actually hiring, once sort of some of my bigger business plans are in place, hiring a group of people who either come from different diverse backgrounds or have really studied that and have been sort of part of those things, to be able to like look at every aspect of my business like every 6 months. Let's sit down, you guys, question anything. And I want you guys to come up, got you folks here, I see just the very gendered term in there, just in my language, um, to to say like, hey, you really should change your intake form in this way, or there's nothing accessible to migrant workers in your approach, or you might I mean, the things that I can think of are the things I can think of, and that's I'm
Yeah, yeah.
more interested in what I can't think of. It's obvious to me that if I'm going to be having splinting material in my OT practice, that I should have more colors than just tan and calling it skin tone. I mean, but I'm sure there's a lot more things than that.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
that's why I have ideas of doing a gym down the road. And I was like, is there something I might not be thinking about regarding restrooms? And I mean, what you mentioned is something that seems like the obvious. What the Grange does, I really like their setup there. It just
Oh yeah, yeah. I was like, I haven't been there in so long, but you're right. Yeah,
yeah, it's it's really comfortable and nice, and like it's
yeah.
just
It's
and,
super chill.
and it's friendly in the sense that when you're done doing your business, you're washing your hands next to anyone,
Hmm.
and it's
It's kind of like, oh, all right. Like it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah.
so yeah, that's where I'm sort of thinking about different people's ability to have resilience, and that's sort of where my business is at.
Yeah.
And it seems like you have a business model um, that's acutely aware of that, and that's really part of what you do. Um, are there other aspects of of your model that you feel like make it more accessible or different, or that are different than what one might typically find?
Um, I think it's just, I mean, chronic illness is one of those things that comes up a lot too, and that can be really hard for people to approach fitness when they're chronically ill. And I know a lot of practitioners have experience with that, so I'm not exclusive when it comes to that. It's just that also is an awareness of mine. Like if somebody comes to me and they have fibro or something like that, I'm aware that they're not going to be able to do a whole lot of the things that they would love to be able to do. And how do I kind of tailor? Being resourceful is really an integral part, and just still being actively curious about how I can work with people is another thing that is important to me. If somebody comes to me and they've got ADHD or autism, how can I help them perform in a way that they would feel comfortable with an awareness of how they might approach something? And so, just constantly being curious and learning, just being an active learner is a big part of my approach, I think.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this bonus material. If so, share it with a friend and subscribe via the podcatcher of your choice. While you're there, you can always leave a 5-star review, and that really does help out quite a bit. You've been listening to Resilience Radio bonus material. Take care.